Brattleboro's Community Talk Show. I'm Wendy O'Connell, and today on our show we have Barbi Schulick. Barbi is a writer, a business owner, and a meditation teacher. She and her husband Paul Schulick co-founded businesses that focus on the wholeness of body, mind, and spirit, including the Natural Apothecary that was here on Main Street that many of us remember from the 90s, and New Chapter Vitamins and Supplements. One of Barbi's great loves is meditation, and she offers weekly phone meditations on Sundays. She's currently involved with her husband Paul with their new venture called byOm Life. So we are here today with Barbi. Thank you, Barbi, for coming on the show.
Very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you
spend time
here.
with you.
Yes, yes. And we have so much to cover, so we're just going to try to move right along. I know that one of the things when I think of you is your writing, and that you've done a lot of writing. And I was wondering, is this something that you picked up early when you were a kid?
I was just thinking about it on my way over, because I knew we'd be talking about it, and realized that I did at a very young age have that pull. I remember a teacher in third grade who gave, we all have one of those, right?
I know.
Who gave a little essay assignment, and I wrote about having a cold. And there was something about the way I did it. I think I gave a certain kind of detail that wasn't usual for a kid. You know, something about the raspy feeling under the nose, and just how it felt to have a cold. I gave real specifics, and she noted that. And there was something about that, because I loved her, and that positive reinforcement that I think made me realize that that's something I loved to do and I wanted to do. And I think that I just always gave a lot of care to letter writing, etc. And then as I grew, I started just naturally writing these little personal essays, and eventually that grew into really doing them in earnest and publishing.
And so were you doing this through high school and then into college as well?
In high school, I was on the school newspaper. I did it that way. And then in college, I also started at Lesley College. I started at the newspaper. I wrote op-ed. I got a piece into the Harvard Crimson complaining that the Harvard boys called the Lesley girls their bedroom, and that, no, we were actually educators, and we were bringing in the next generation of thinkers. So I always had a feisty little side to the way I wrote. I did op-ed for the Reformer for many years.
Yes.
And then I wrote mostly memoir, the number of traumatic events that brought out my desire to write about those. And then I started doing more fiction, and I wrote a little piece, Katz Finds Her Guru, a little novel about spirituality, my own spiritual path, and but it's fiction based on truth. So, yeah, I've tried all forms.
You have, and so that's definitely a very strong place of expression for you.
Yeah.
And when you're talking, I'm realizing that you're writing memoir, but you're writing a little bit. You're writing in all these different genres. And did you do journals, or did this take the place of journals?
You know, I've never been a journaler. It just. Yeah, it was almost that I would have to write down and write a real piece.
Yes,
you know, but it's not that journaling isn't real, but I really was interested in the craft. I did an enormous amount of reading. Yeah. I love the greats, you know, and I would read great short stories over and over and over again. I also tutored for a long time. I used to tutor at the Putney School in literature, so I was always interested in that myself, and it just gave rise to my own writing. It would always be that. And I was in writing groups here. We have wonderful writing groups. I was in Jan Fraser's group, the wonderful group of people on Wednesday nights for years. And so it's always been a pulse for me.
So I'm wondering if, you know, there's been such a big emphasis on journal writing over the years. Was an audience part of your format in writing?
I think as I was in a group for so long, that the group becomes the audience, and that format gives positive feedback, which is actually extremely effective, because it's new writing and you hear what worked. And so you kind of go away knowing what didn't work without it being said, but you also know what to embellish, and you're able to work on the characters and the dialogue, whatever that people loved, and create more of that, you know, just keep going in that direction. So that audience was always there for me because I always had writing buddies. And I did attempt to publish, and I did publish a number of pieces, so that would come. But that wasn't the goal. It was more the process, I think.
Right.
I also did a lot of ad copy. I was writing for a business. I wrote our label copy. I wrote all of our business literature all through the years, so which I loved. I loved the short form of the ad copy, and
you got to get it right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love concise economic writing, and so that really pushed me. Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit to Boston, when you and Paul get together somehow in some magical way in Boston, right?
We actually met in White Plains, New York.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, and we met because we were both teachers of transcendental meditation. We were part of that big kind of movement in the 70s of boomers, I guess we call us now, but in those days we were the hippies, and there was just a real surge of attention towards spirituality, and there were a number of now famous yogis and roshis and who came over to tell us how it's done in the East. And I was very attracted to the Beatles guru, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and I went to Switzerland for 6 months and studied to become a teacher.
With him?
And with him, and people that he also, gave the teaching to. And it was very, very in-depth study for 6 months, with including silences and fasts and lots and lots of meditation. And when I look back now, I realize how extraordinary that was. I was, I think, 21, 22.
Right.
I started meditating at 19.
Yeah.
And just to have a thirst like that, to do that, I realized now was pretty unusual.
Yeah.
And Paul did the same thing. We didn't know each other while we were doing that, but we met afterwards. We met at a meditation center in White Plains, New York, where we were both teaching actually hundreds of people, because in those days it was TM was all over the place.
Right,
Maharishi was on Griffin, and all kinds of celebrities were meditating. So, so that's how we met. Yeah, and from the day we met, we lived together and worked together. So, because from there we went on to marry and start a business together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was in Lexington. When you
Yes.
did that.
And we went to Lexington because kind of the close cousin of teaching meditation for us, and you couldn't make a living doing that. So after we got married, we realized, we actually want to make a little bit of money here and there to support ourselves and have children. And through meditation, the interest was so much around, I think the thirst has to be there to do something like that. And so we were both driven by, what is this anyway? What is this thing we call life, And it sounds cliche, but actually there's those moments, and I had them since I was a little girl, really questioning what life was. My grandpa was an Orthodox Jew, and he was a mystical seeker. He was from, he was actually Sephardic, and more like a Sufi. And so the mysticism was always there in my life. And I used to ask him lots of questions. And so that was always there for me.
Yeah.
And so, catching that wave was a very natural next step.
Yes.
And so for Paul, too, in his own way, he was doing that. And that is really what bonded us. I think we've always had a marriage bonded by the spiritual search.
Yeah.
And so when we wanted to do something, it was going to have to be something we really believed in, that we felt was following that path of wholeness, of body, mind, spirit. And for Paul, it was very natural to lean towards herbal healing, because he was the son of a pediatrician who'd gone on house calls with his dad since he was a little boy. And he was driven to heal, but not allopathically. And so we were introduced to Ayurveda through the things we were doing, as well as traditional, Native American herbalism, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's what led us to buy a health food store in Lexington. My dad, who was also a deep inspiration to us, was an entrepreneur. And I grew up around family business. And he somehow believed in us, these crazy kids who meditated all day and ate tofu, and he couldn't understand us at all. But he believed in us,
Yeah.
and so he loaned us the money to buy this little shop in Lexington, and that's where we started.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So you were doing that. You've been in business together for...
Well, we've been together. We celebrated our 40th anniversary this year. 41st anniversary. And we were together 2 years before that,
Yeah.
so 43 years.
Yeah, of working and living together.
Yes,
That's a real
yes.
testament.
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
it's really unusual.
Yeah.
And so, so you were doing the business in Lexington, and what brought you to Brattleboro?
We had the natural food store for about 7 years, called Mother Earth, beautiful little 600 square foot store. And while we were there, Paul really, he became known as that guy at the health food store who can help you with your health problems. And he was always deep into the research.
Right.
And really, really wanted to heal and help people. And while we were at the store, we started making our first products because we were also always about raising consciousness. That's where the meditation comes in. Is what do we need to do that's missing? You know, what do people need to understand that we don't understand yet? It was always about that. We were never satisfied with status quo. And so we were creating products that were very new to the industry, very different, delivering herbals in a certain kind of way, delivering food supplementation in a way that was real food and hadn't been done yet. So that started to become more driving for us, and we decided to sell the store to our manager, which was wonderful for her. And we wanted a like-minded community. We really, we landed in Lexington because it was the place where this lovely store was for sale. But we always felt a little bit like square pegs in a round hole there. And we were the ones with the Birkenstocks, you know, and friends said, check out Vermont, you know, check out Brattleboro, and as soon as we got here, we knew this is the place we need to be.
Really, that's so great.
we just came here to start a business and raise a family.
Yeah. And that was early 80s?
That was 86.
86.
Yep.
86, and so that brings us right to the Apothecary on Main Street,
yes.
right? Was that available when you first got here?
Well, we actually started in our house. We had 3 years of madness building this little business in our house. We built a house here.
Yeah.
Like most of us, on the top of a ridiculously high driveway.
Yeah, right.
And we just did it in the house. We had employees in the house. We had herbal deliveries coming up that driveway, and because we couldn't do another rent at that point. But after 3 years, we first of all had to get out of the house because it was driving all of us crazy.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And we were ready, and so that's when we landed on Main Street in Brattleboro on 99 Main Street.
Yeah.
And we were just looking for space to run the business in, but the space we found was actually where Borough Sportswear is now.
Yes.
And it ran all, it was all the way back to the river, and also underneath where they have their bike shop. So we had our manufacturing, our warehouse and shipping was downstairs, and our offices were upstairs. And then there was this beautiful retail space.
Yes.
So we were retailers. We knew how to do retail.
Yep, right.
That's how we got into the industry. So we opened the Natural Apothecary.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes.
That makes it clear because I forgot Paul had a whole office space in back.
Yes.
He was doing deep research.
That's it. It was New Chapter.
Yeah, that was the
Yes.
beginning.
Yes, that was
Were
it.
you calling it that then?
I think we called it New Moon Extracts.
Oh, that sounds
That was
familiar.
our first name because we made these lovely extracts according to the cycles of the moon. But the New Chapter name came with the very first product, which was the natural vitamin, the supplement.
Yes.
Every Man, Every Woman.
Yes.
And that we called New Chapter. But it was also under the New Moon Extracts Incorporation, but then we shifted over to New Chapter.
Yeah, got
Became
it.
the name of the
Okay.
company.
And it was a real retail store, and you not only had your own products, but you had other people's products as well, right?
Yeah, what we did is we gave anyone that shopped there the 10%. We linked in with the co-op, so we weren't competing with the co-op, but you could use your co-op discount with us. I think that's how we did it. But we also sold a few chosen lines, like one homeopathic and one essential oil and one tea line, that we just felt was kind of a new chapter in its own right. But the real focus of the Apothecary was education, and that's also been a theme for us.
Yes.
Paul gave lectures there. We invited other people in the healthcare field to lecture. People gave mini massages. We had Feldenkrais and reflexology, and you could have like a 10-minute little rub in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
We had a place for women to nurse in what was formerly, I think, a dressing room.
Yeah.
We had an herbal library. And it was just a wonderful gathering place.
It was a wonderful gathering place, and it always felt great to go in there.
Yes.
And Anna Subert was running it for a while, and she was very accommodating. She
job.
also knew a lot of stuff about all of this as well.
Yeah.
But it was a really warm and open and friendly place. It was wonderful to have on Main Street. Yeah. And it was also beautiful physically. It was one of the nicest little storefronts in town.
And the essential oils as soon as you walked in.
Yes.
And
and that was all new.
It
you
was.
know, that was all new.
Yes.
Paul's in the back room working and doing more.
Creating products.
Creating products, right. And New Chapter came out of that. And you guys were really pioneers in whole food supplementation. And I think that people really recognize that, you know, and you got so big. You got to be such a huge company. At some point, did the Apothecary morph into New Chapter? Did it just become too unwieldy to do both businesses?
It was more that we got too big for the space.
Yes.
And we eventually moved over to 22 High Street. I think where the dance school is now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we were over the printers.
Griswold.
Griswold.
Yeah.
And they would print all our stuff.
That's great.
So that's really why eventually the Apothecary moved out of the picture. I think it actually wasn't a profit venture.
Right.
It was carried by New Chapter.
Yes.
So without having the rest of the business there, it didn't make any sense.
And I would think you would both be being spread a little bit thin. Plus, you had kids by that time.
Yes.
And and during that time, Barbi, were you tending to your writing as well?
You know, amazingly, it kept going.
That's
At
great.
both meditation and writing. It never. You know, certainly there were periods where I didn't write, but I actually just wrote something late last night that I needed to write for a new venture, and was reminded how it works for me. If I don't write for a while, it's almost like it builds up in my body, and I get in a really sour mood. And it's a reminder that I need to open that valve.
You need to bring it forth.
And it's for me, it's part of the incubation. That it's almost like a birth. You know, there's a period of time where you're just holding the writing and your psyche's working it, and then it has to come out.
Yes.
So I wrote quite a few pieces. I was starting to publish. I was always targeting The Sun, which was one of my favorite magazines.
Yeah.
And I finally got in.
Oh, good.
And so it just, you know, I would write at all crazy hours. I'd be working at home with the kids around and helping with homework, proofing labels, and writing an essay. And somehow it just worked that way for me.
Well, it sounds like it works for the whole family as well.
Yeah.
You know, for all of you to be under one roof, and some different roofs, but you know, to be together in that way.
Yeah, and I think because the kids grew up around that, they both ended up really doing their own thing. They never came into business with us. They did when they were little kids. They would make things and come to work after school, or Rosie worked on our Jeremy Rose cosmetic line. She used to peel the cucumbers, and Jeremy would come and he loved the label gun, you know, the glue gun, whatever it was. But, so they both always had heart for it, but they went on and did their own thing. And Rosie's got her little card business in town, and Rosie's Wonders, and she actually sells all over the country. Wonderful.
Oh, that's great.
Cards she creates, and Jeremy's an accomplished musician and a composer, and did that for quite a while. His 350 duo, classical guitar duo. And now he's working with Drawdown on climate change.
Well, it's interesting too, because I know that you mentioned that your father was a mentor to you, and he is an entrepreneur as well, so you sort of have it in your bones.
Absolutely. And my dad, I think, you know, I realized he really taught us about quality, serving the customer. But he also taught us about passion, that, you know, you have to love what you're doing. He always made the best. And his product was plumbing supplies, so he loved it, but it didn't necessarily totally inspire him as a product.
Yeah.
So he was actually a self-made, just learner of life. He
Yeah.
studied everything, and that is what gave rise to my love of reading. He used to, we had what we called breakfast lessons as little kids, and we would read all the great writers. We studied all of O. Henry.
Oh, wow.
We studied languages together. I learned all the French Impressionists. We used to have Renoir pasted to the refrigerator. Or I remember one time we were studying Modigliani and we had the nudes on the refrigerator. I was in first grade and I took one for show and tell. And the teacher called my dad in because she thought that was very inappropriate. But I just felt so lucky to have a father who introduced me to just great art, great writing, and love of life that way.
That's wonderful, and that's unusual, too.
It's very unusual.
Yeah, and to have that every morning, that was part of your daily ritual?
Yes.
That's a beautiful thing.
And we had to recite poetry, memorize it, and one of them was If by Rudyard Kipling, and when we moved to Brattlewell, we ended up on Kipling Road.
Yes.
And strangely, his plumbing supplies were in the house. My father had passed, and his business had been sold. And it was a good business, but it wasn't that big. And here was this, the house had, when it was built, the plumbing supplies were put in. I didn't even know that they had used his brand. So
oh my gosh.
the whole thing was
incredible.
Little bit interesting.
Yeah,
And he's always he hasn't been with us for a long time, but he's still kind of with business. I have his picture on my monitor, and he's helped us through a lot.
A guiding light.
Yeah, he has been.
Yeah, that's very sweet. That's a great story. You've been in business for these many years, and you've gone through many different forms of leadership and many different avenues in your career. And now, you and I talked about this a little bit, coming into our 60s is such a different territory.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's but I think of course, everything has to do with how you look at it and how you feel it. And for me, it's become this wonderful opening, and I can see just by looking at you and the show that you're doing, it's the same for you. And it's different now, I think, for women our age. It's kind of just the way it's going, where there's this opportunity to emerge. And I think also we were that generation that we were a little bit unsure, ambiguous about, we were in the women's movement, but there was always but don't I have to support my husband's career, and is it really, can it be about me too? And I was definitely of that ilk, where there were a lot of years of which way do I go? And a lot of my career was about supporting Paul's career. But what we found over the years is that as a couple, we grew into seeing that it's both, and it's not an either or, it's an and.
Right.
And as we are now in our 60s, we've absolutely melded into a oneness and a one-ship in the way that we do things, and our appreciation for what we both bring to the whole. So that has greatly uplifted and informed me. And because business isn't easy, and I've had to do a lot of roles and be a leader that move from the heart, has always been very, very important to me, and do what I really believe. And there have been moments where it required a great deal of courage and soul searching. So, and I'm glad for that.
Yeah.
It's really molded me, and I think that that's a big part of why now I'm feeling as excited and happy as I do, because I have much more confidence than I did when I was younger.
Yes, and so much falls away, I think, over the course of the years.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done this show 5 years ago, probably.
Even 5 years
because
ago.
you sort of accept yourself in a different kind of way, and you see what it is that you love
Yeah.
and what you want to follow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also your perspective changes so much, I
Yes.
think. You see, I would think that, in terms of dealing with employees for you and people who are working for you, the way you go about it. Also, you bringing meditation into the workplace is a big piece of it.
And to do it boldly. I think that's what's changing.
Yeah.
And especially as we start our new venture, byOm, which is just really an extension of our mission to heal. And this time we're doing it through the skin and the microbiome. And I know Paul will be on the show eventually, and he can talk more about that. But just the boldness of learning from the many years and saying, okay, this is what matters most to us. This is what we loved most. I'm really looking at the culture we build to be a culture of consciousness and kindness and service. And for somehow those three are coming to the top for me, because it's really about love, you know, and to not be afraid to say so. It's about love and oneness and celebration of life and giving back. And you know, we're looking at employee ownership. We're looking at how do we give back, offer revenues, not offer profit, to really, really be bold in our model, and to see if we can inspire others to do the same. And to put an extraordinary product out there that makes people just die to have it, and then use the revenues to give back immediately. And so that's making us very, very excited. And integrating meditation into the workplace is very, very powerful. It's hard to even put words to what daily meditation can do for people. And I think that's a huge part of what our path has been about. So I've always offered meditation in the workplace, but this time it's really going to be central to what makes the place tick.
And are you doing it daily with your employees?
We have a phone meditation of our own once a week, and then during different meetings we'll just stop and take 10 minutes of meditation.
Nice.
And we also do walking meditations together. So we just find different ways to put it in, but mostly what's important to me is that they learn and they do it on their own, you know, and it becomes something that they grow with. And people do it in all different ways. There's also Qigong and there's yoga. But just having the recognition that pulling ourselves back into a quiet space and finding out who we actually are underneath all that noise, and letting that spiritual quality inform our work coming out is really what meditation is for. It's to make us more powerful people in the world.
That's wonderful. It's a great mission, Barbi, and I think too, you know, you are both individually and together, and through the business, you're creating new models. You know, and that's you know, again, you know, being pioneers in very different ways, but all towards very positive things and health and well-being. You know.
Healing on many levels.
Healing on many levels, and informing too. You know, informing. You know, the different.
That's a big part of it.
It's a big part of it, and you're again under one roof. I love that.
It's amazing. We're just, you know, we're in the house, and okay, let's do it again. You know, and it just feels right. It seems like, for us, there's never been a separation between work and home life, and. You know, we certainly sequester quiet time and meditation time, but we work it into the day, and work just flows to that, and then we flow right back into work, and we're working the second we get up in the morning until we go to sleep at night, but there's lots of lovely breaks during the day to help replenish ourselves.
Yeah, it's all of one piece,
yes,
you know,
it's all of one piece.
So you're living a much more whole life in that way. Lovely. Thank you, Barbi.
Thank you, too.
Thank you.
This was so much fun.
We zipped through a lot of things. We could have done
did.
some more, but that was really fun.
It was great.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you, too.
And thanks to all of you out there in our audience. Thanks for joining us. And we will be back again next week with yet another wonderful guest, and we hope to see you then.